Yeah. I'm now joined on the line by Barry Cahill to look ahead to the upcoming All Ireland football final between Dublin and Tyrone. And Barry Cahill would have served many years in the Dublin jersey and graced the fields of Croke Park. And Barry, as you look on ahead to this weekend's All Ireland football final, Dublin coming into the back of it of three in a row, are you, as a Dublin now supporter and ex-player, are you as confident as ever?
Yeah, you'd have to be confident going into Sunday's final against Tyrone. I think this group of players are a special bunch, and obviously a really good manager and Jim Gavin and management team in place there over a number of years. But I think the Dublin County Board have to deserve a lot of credit for the structures they put in place about 10 years ago. I think we're seeing the fruits of that work that they put in over the last couple of years, and the team has had a lot thrown at them over the last 2 or 3 years, but they've responded to pretty much every challenge that's been put in their way, and I'd be hopeful that they'll be able to do the same now on Sunday.
Yeah, and I suppose the key ingredient of any real team is their ability to keep building when they're ahead and stronger, and integrate new players and keep it fresh the whole time and not let a setup get stale. And we've seen the emergence of some new players into the Dublin fold this year, the likes of Brian Howard, the likes of Niall Scully has kicked on again to another level, and these sort of players that probably wouldn't have been household names the last 2 or 3 years, they keep coming out of the people weren't aware of these names, and yet they've transformed into season regulars into this Dublin side.
Yeah, I mean, the team starting on Sunday is a lot different than the 2013 All-Ireland with the team in Jim Gavin's first year. But that's the nature of it. The team has to keep developing, has to keep evolving. The likes of maybe a Bernard Brogan or a Dermot Conley aren't going to go on forever, and they're not going to be playing much action on Sunday, but other guys have emerged over the last couple of years. As you mentioned, the likes of Niall Scully, who's been very successful in terms of being a Dublin under-21 footballer for a few years. Brian Howard as well. I knew where he was playing, 5 or 6 years in senior football for Dublin, because he's adapted to it so well. And another guy in particular, Owen Merchant, has come into the defence during the Super 8s, and he looks up to the standard straight away. So I think Dublin are blessed at this period of time with the amount of quality players Jim has at his disposal, and the strength and depth, and we probably would have seen that over the last couple of years. That was probably the key ingredient that got them over the line against the likes of Mayo in the All-Ireland we play, and those couple of tight games, whereas Mayo haven't had that strength and depth that Dublin have had over the last couple of years. But I think it keeps guys on their toes as well. There are a few players there who are there since my time in the team from 2011, where the likes of James McCarthy and Keane O'Sullivan and Philly McMahon and these guys, but you do need that competition for places to try and keep the guys as honest as possible, and at the moment there's a really good balance there, I think.
Yeah, and Barry, many people will say your opponents this weekend, Tyrone, bit by bit they got a sucker punch, and I suppose the ambush by the Dubs last year in Croke Park in the semi-final, and their structure and the game plan just got blitzed early on by Dublin. Steamrolled them in the first 15 minutes, and Tyrone didn't have a plan B to get back into the game. But Mickey Hart will probably have learned a bit from that this year in the league in Omagh. Even though Dublin beat them, you could see that Tyrone brought the game into the last 5 minutes there in the Super 8s as well. Tyrone mixed it with Dublin for long spells. And do you think this All-Ireland final will be as close as the All-Ireland finals that Dublin endured with Mayo and for their supporters? And do you think that what we saw in the All-Ireland semi-final last year between Dublin and Tyrone was a once-off?
Yeah, I think last year's All-Ireland semi-final plays no relevance to this Sunday at all. I think it's a different Tyrone team with a different tactical setup. The likes of Sean Kavanagh have moved on from last year, and I think the overly defensive structure that they had over the last couple of years, they've gone away from it and are a bit more attack-minded. As you mentioned, Tyrone have played Dublin 3 times in the last 12 months, so Mickey Hart would have learned a huge amount out of those 3 games. But I think they have a lot of momentum going into Sunday's game as well. They played 7 championship matches in 9 weeks and haven't come through that period. You learn a huge amount about players, about what way to set up. And I think now that they've had that 3-week break coming in to play Dublin, They will have done a huge amount of homework and analysis, to try and come up with a plan to stifle Dublin and to try and dilute the effectiveness of some of their key. So I think Tyrone will pose a dangerous threat on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see what Mickey Hart does from a team selection, because a number of the subs came on against Donegal 2 games ago and were outstanding, but when he started them in the All-Ireland semi-final against Monaghan, they didn't have the same impact. So it'll be an interesting dilemma for him going ahead to Sunday. Does he keep them in reserve and hope to still be in the game around the 40th, 45th minute and then spring them from the bench, or does he go and try and maybe attack Dublin early on in the game itself and maybe try and get a few points lead? Because for Dublin, if they take a strong lead going into maybe half time, you'd fancy them to push on with the subs that they have. So Tyrone will want to make sure that they're still well in the game at half time.
Yeah, and many people, Barry, will look at both as a player who's played in this position yourself for a number of years. Many people will look at the game and say both half backlines are particularly strong. You have Tiernan McCann and Peter Hart at one side, and Jack McCaffrey and James McCarthy at the other side. But people will maybe look up front and say the starting Dublin 6 probably have the edge over the Tyrone 6 in terms of scoring efficiency. We no longer see the likes of Tyrone in the past could call on the likes of Stephen O'Neill, Owen Mulligan, Peter Canavan, some real marquee forwards that guarantee you 8-9 points a game, and maybe that's labelled at Tyrone, that they don't have the 2 or 3 players that can go off up front for 8 or 9 points a game, where like Dublin on the other hand probably have Conor O'Callaghan in there, Paul Mannion, Kieran Kilkenny, that will all days will up to around 5 or 6 points a game. And when Tyrone don't have that Paddy McBrearty or Conor McManus, and do you think they'll need 2 or 3 of their forwards to catch fire this weekend?
Yeah, I think definitely Dublin have that edge up front in terms of marquee forwards who are able to cause opposition defences a bit more trouble. I mean, if you look at one guy in particular, Cormac Costello, who's been on the bench for Dublin the last few years, I think he would start for Tyrone if he was a Tyrone man, because he's such a top quality player, and he always racks up a few scores when he does get onto the pitch. So for Tyrone, they will need the likes of McAllister, Bradley, Lee Brennan when he gets on the pitch to be a lot more efficient up front than maybe they've done in previous years. I think in the Monaghan game in the All-Ireland semi-final, Tyrone got the first 4 points in the first 4 attacks, but they missed a number of chances after that, drop balls into keeper's hands, hit a lot of wides. I think their shot selection was poor, and they'll need to improve in that area. But I expect they will improve. They do have good forwards. They do have a better spread of scores as well. I mean, the likes of Colin Kavanagh, Tiernan McCann, Matty Donnelly, Peter Hart, and Niall Sludden are all capable of racking, maybe 2 or 3 points each, and that can maybe get towards the 16, 17 point mark that could actually get you over the line. So they're not over-reliant on anyone, but I think a few of their inside forwards will need to give maybe a 9 out of 10 performance on Sunday, alright?
Yeah, and I suppose, Barry, if I can pick out 2 players in particular for either side in relation to carrying that scoring threat, and we all know the influence of Conor O'Callaghan up front, the Coola star in relation to his footballing abilities and the real goal threat he possesses. And then on the other side you have Niall Sludden, who probably is the creator and conductor in chief on the 40 there for Tyrone. And they're 2 players who will have to have really marquee performances for if both of their sides want to be successful.
Yeah, they will. I mean, I think there's going to be a number of matchups that will be interesting. The likes of John Small has done a good job on Peter Hart the last couple of times they played him, and John will play very close to the edge, so it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. And then similarly, Owen Merchant did a good job on Sludden up in Oma there a few weeks ago. He matches up very well to him, but I think Sludden, and probably along with Colin Kavanagh, has been, one of Tyrone's 2 best players this summer. So I think Mickey Hart will probably need a bit more out of Tiernan McCann that he's probably got this summer. They need a bit more out of their captain, Matty Donnelly, as well, who's a top-class footballer, but has maybe only played in patches to date. And I think potentially a lot of those Tyrone players can catch fire on Sunday. And if they do, I think Dublin will be in for a real test. But I think for this Dublin team, they're so experienced. They nearly don't need much of an influence from the sideline with Jim Gavin, because the guys on the pitch seem to be able to figure out a way to get on the ball, and they're a lot more of a measured team, or they have a lot more of a measured, methodical approach than maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when they maybe leaked a few goals and would have had a few gaps in the back line. The likes of Cian O'Sullivan has really shown that up, particularly in the absence of Rory Carroll, who moved on a couple of years ago. So expecting a lot of big performances, but I think the individual matchups will be key to how this goes, and in particular how Tyrone managed the likes of Brian Fenton and Kieran Kilkenny, who are probably the two favourites for Footballer of the Year this year so far.
And Barry, if I can just talk to about 3 elder statesmen of the Dublin team that have been around in your heyday as well, the likes of Stephen Cluxton, Paul Flynn and Bernard Brogan, long servants of the Dublin jersey, and these boys are going for a presented 4 in a row, and they've been there, done it. And what are, in terms of legendary status in terms of Dublin football, I suppose those 3 players, if they compete the 4 in a row, will probably go down as probably the 3 of the greatest players ever to wear the Dublin jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been well documented the influence Stephen Cluxton has had on GEA in general, not just Dublin GEA. I mean, he's been a phenomenal player for Dublin back since 2001 when he made his debut the same year as myself. Now we've gone on to lift the Sam Maguire 4 times already, and he's 5 medals under his belt, going for another one now on Sunday. And then you have Paul Flynn, who a couple of years ago would have been rated, I think, pound for pound the best footballer in the country. He managed to win 4 All-Stars in a row, which is a phenomenal level of consistency in the modern game. And Bernard Brogan, I think we would have expected to see a lot more game time for Bernard this summer if he hadn't suffered that cruciate knee ligament injury back last February. It was great to see him get back on the pitch for the Roscommon game a few weeks ago. But I'd say he'll find it hard to get back in, to get a bit of game time on Sunday, such as the strength and depth that Jim has at his disposal up front.
Yeah.
Look at the likes of Paul Flynn, Owen O'Gara, Cormac Costello, Paddy Andrews all on the bench. It can be very difficult, but the lads have been phenomenal servants to Dublin over the last number of years, and they've really set the standards within the Dublin camp, and that's why we see the likes of Scully and a Howard and a Conor Callahan coming to the fore. It's because of the influence those guys have had on them over the last 2-3 years.
Barry Cahill, it's been a pleasure talking to you here as we look ahead to the All-Ireland football final between Tyrone and Dublin to give us a Dublin perspective. I know the fan base and the crowd support is going to be humongous as well on the Hill 16 this weekend, and I suppose lastly, as a player, as an ex-player looking on, I suppose you would still love to lace up those boots and be on that field come Sunday if the possibility was there. And Barry, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.